everyone, welcome to Amy's Bookshelf and welcome to my mid-September wrap-up. So in September so far, I am participating in 30 books in 30 days, and I unintentionally have hit that goal bar one book in the first 13 days of the month. So it is the 13th of September when I'm filming this, but I have read 29 books so far, and I did not plan on that. However, it's just how it happened, and I am going to go over those books with you. Hopefully I can get a good cohesive review out for you. I am posting this after my kind of channel update, life update video. I don't know what to exactly call it, but I talk about there that I was vlogging a lot, and I have recorded all these thoughts in vlogs, and now I'm not going to be vlogging it. I'm not going to post that vlog. So we will be going over them individually here. Kind of individually. We'll get into that. Okay, so the first one we'll go over, I'm going to go over from the beginning of the month. So I will leave their name, the book name, and the author name, and the timestamp so you can get to the book that you would like if you don't want to listen to a particular book. So the first one we're going to talk about is Mr. Popper's Penguin. This one's by Richard Atwood, Richard and Florence Atwood. This is the first book in this series, and I didn't realize that when I picked it up, but I read it for middle grade magic. This one is about, I think it's like the 1950s or 60s. Let me see, it was originally published in 1938, so no, it was like published, it's about the 30s. Anyways, it is about a man named Mr. Popper who has a wife and 2 children, and he is very much in love with exploring and the idea of it, but he's just a house painter. And then one day he writes a letter to a man who like works with penguins in the Antarctica, and this man sends him a penguin. So Popper gets a penguin, and suddenly he becomes the celebrity of the week or of the season. And this book is really about them, and then how they get another penguin, and how the penguin family grows. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cute. Some things are different, but it's a middle grade classic. It's written in 1938. So I think that that's okay to have as a difference in time era. You can't expect perfection about it. I do enjoy the movie, and I haven't watched that in a very long time, but the movie of Mr. Popper's Penguins. And I knew of this book from when I was a kid. So it was really cool to read it. It's very short, but very easy to read, and very interesting about their antics and what happens to this family who's actually really on the poor side when the book starts. So I thought that was interesting, and I really enjoyed this one. So I think I gave it 4 stars, no, 3 stars. I'm looking at my story graph here with hopefully all the information I need. So 3 stars for that one. It was good, but it's also not my kind of genre with animals as one of the main heroes or main focus of books, and that's okay. That's just not my thing, and I can appreciate it for what it is. Speaking of another animal book, I read The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This one I am giving 3 stars as well. So that one, it was just not my thing again. And I think with it, I had a feeling when I was reading it. I was like, if I was reading this because I read it as a child and I loved it as a child, I would love this so much more. But because I don't have the nostalgia attached to The Wind in the Willows, I did not find it overly, I don't know, familiar or something tugging at my heartstrings. It wasn't that way for me, and that's okay. I just was like, the first one I just already talked about, it's just not for me. But I feel like if I had read it when I was a kid and then rereading it now, I would feel a lot more positive feelings towards it as opposed to neutral feelings. So overall, it was good. It was interesting about the animals as they have their life on the riverbank and the different things that happen. Toad was an interesting person. Well, interesting animal. And I can't say I approve of him. But that's just my little rule following heart there. So I don't know. Yeah, interesting, but just not my kind of book, and that's okay. I also read, so these are all from middle grade magic too. So I also read The Horse and His Boy and The Magician's Nephew. So these are the 2 books in the Chronicles of Narnia, book 5 and 6 in publication order. book 1 and 4 in chronological order. Whatever. I like to read them in publication. So I'm reading this with the Narnia read along, and I am actually really enjoying it. I didn't expect to not enjoy it, but I expected that I would just be like, oh yeah, rereading them. No, this is wonderful. I love going through them slowly but surely, but also a couple books a month, and really reading and then truly getting myself back into this world again. It's been a year since I've read it. So The Horse and His Boy is a 5-star for me. I know it has racist like undertones and overtones, but I thoroughly love everything else about this book. I think it is just so interesting, and I love how the horses are the ones who are talking horses and carrying the children, but I also love how the children develop and how they're really outsiders while being present. And I think it's just really interesting to see the Narnian world from another perspective than children who come from our world. So I think that's really cool. So I really liked this. Definitely 5 stars, even though it's not perfection. I think it warms my nostalgia feelings, just like The Wind in the Willows didn't, and all of that this one does. Even though talking horses, I know I'm a book of contradictions right now, but the only one that really gets a pass for me is Narnia, for talking animals with talking people, unless it's a fantasy world designed for that. We'll get to that one later, or that point later. Anyways, I also read Soul Lantern by Kuzki. This one is a historical fiction set in, well, just set after World War II. It's set about 25 years after. It's about 25 years after the bombing of Hiroshima, and how the children are trying to come up with a memorial for the big festival. Now, this one, they end up settling on making paintings of all of the different things that happened, like the day of, or the day before, or the last word someone spoke, or the last time they saw someone right before the bombing of Hiroshima. So it's a lot about talking to people who have survived Hiroshima, but also going through how that would impact the next generation. The author herself is a second generation survivor, so her parents survived, and she was the same age as these children in 1970s something. I can't remember the year exactly, but it is very interesting because it's basically a repeat of her own experiences. I don't know if she made the actual festival. So I think it's really a powerful book, talking about war, talking about the struggle of the common people, but also talking about the value of life, and all talking about it in a really older child, preteen, age appropriate way. So I think it's really wonderful. So I read that one. Then I went through a Bible blitz. Sorry, I'm gonna go over them quickly. So I read Daniel, Obadiah, Amos, Hosea, Joel. Okay, that was what I read in the beginning. Okay, so I read those ones at the beginning of the month, and then I also read, no, that's it. I have already talked about those, except for Narnia, which I really didn't explain. In The Horse and His Boy, it's about a boy who is running away from his father, who he finds out right at the very beginning is not actually his father. He has been basically fostered, and he is running away to Narnia with a horse who can talk, Bree. Then in The Magician's Nephew, it's about the creation of Narnia and a boy named Diggory, whose Uncle Andrew has found magic, and how that works out. So really enjoyable, 5 stars for both of them. Then I read Rinkitink in Oz. So this is by L. Frank Baum, and I have trouble with this series. So this is book 10 in the series, and I am not enjoying myself. The reason why is, so first of all, I'm giving this one 3 stars. It's not like a 2-star book. But the problem I'm having with this world is that, one, we meet new characters every time. And this is a character-driven book series, in my opinion. And so I feel like with the Anne series, this was the same thing, where when you have characters that you need to care about, you need to actually have a connection with them. I don't have a connection with anyone from Oz now. And also, I have a real struggle with the fact that whenever, we're coming to like the last 3 chapters and all these troubles have been created and all these things have happened, all these adventures have occurred, at the last 3 chapters, Dorothy or Ozma or the snowman or the scarecrow or the Tin Woodman, someone appears out of magic and just is like, oh, I've been watching all along and now I'm gonna step in and help at the very end, like they want the glory. I don't know if that's just me. That's me putting things on because I am disappointed. I'm disappointed that when we have Rinkitink and Oz, first of all, they're not in Oz, okay? Oz is a country on a globe. Okay, but also Rinkitink is not the king of Oz. He is a king of another country and he is barely in Oz. And then he is not the main person. He's not the main hero. The hero's a boy and I don't remember his name right now because the book is called Rinkitink. No, thank you. But then also I'm having a struggle with the fact that, you know, this boy did so much to save his people and his parents and he did so many things. And at the very last minute, Dorothy's like, you open it to the chapter and says, Dorothy's been watching all along, and now she decides to go and help. And so then she goes and helps them with the gnomes. I'm like, I'm mad because this is not how I want Oz to be. The next one is The Lost Princess of Oz that I need to read. I am going to finish the series because I bought the nice, beautiful bind up editions and hardcover, and I'm not going to just be like, well, I'm not going to finish the series now. But the next one is called The Lost Princess of Oz, and I think that's where Ozma goes missing. So hopefully we get some like character connections again. But honestly, I'm really upset with these books. So the next one I also read was The Orange Shirt Story. This is by Phyllis Webstad. This one is a nonfiction about how children were taken to residential schools and how the residential school process was. It's told in a picture book story, and I think it's very mild in certain ways, but it's also very age appropriate for children under 5. Obviously a little wordy, I think, but still overall, I would say it's a 5-star. I think it's well worth reading, and I think it's really important. And this is about the origin of why you wear an orange shirt. And I think it's just really important. So I think this book was really well done, especially for the age group that it's directed at, while also talking about residential schools and how that impacts it. It talks also about how the different children suffered in there without going into too much detail. So I appreciate that for the age appropriateness that it is. So there's that, 5 stars, picture book. That was also for Amy's Game of a Bookish Life prompt of Indigenous author. So there's that one. Then I have read The Science of Murder, the Forensics of Agatha Christie by Carla Valentine, or Valentine, I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name. This is a book that examines all of the murder aspects in Agatha Christie's work. So this one talks about different things like blood splatter. This one talks about even the difference between blood splatter and blood spatter and blood splatter. The L is missing in one of them. And the difference between it. It talks about fingerprints. It talks about ballistics. It talks about documents. And literally, as I was just reading The Moving Finger, which is going to come up, because it's full of papers, like full of envelopes that are mailed out. Like, these are all documents. And I've just read about all of that. So I'm giving this book 5 stars. It was so well done. And none of it was spoiling for other books. And none of it was over, like, too informative when it came to the plot lines of Agatha Christie. But it would say in this book, like for example, The Moving Finger. In The Moving Finger, documents play a really key role because of this, and it's information you find out right away. So none of it's spoiling the end result. And it also was very careful to be accurate and informative. And Carla Valentine is a coroner. So she performs autopsies, and it was really interesting that she has such a wide variety of knowledge, and she really told the history of everything, of how fingerprints became into an existence and how all of those things happened. She told the history on top of being very discreet with Christie's plot lines and plot points, which I really appreciated. So highly recommend The Science of Murder. I think it's a wonderful Agatha Christie nonfiction. So then I also have read The Franchise Affair by Josephine. I read this for the book club with Kate Howe, although we haven't had a meeting yet, and I might have missed the meeting. Either way, I read it. I'm giving it 4 stars. This one is an interesting premise. So it follows a woman who, well, a man. It follows a man, and I can't remember his name right now, but he is a lawyer, and he is asked by these 2 ladies to come and help them because they have been accused of kidnapping a girl and locking her in their attic and beating her and making her be their servant. These two women are a mother and daughter duo who are on the poorer side, and the daughter has never married, so they have no money coming in that way. It is a very interesting story because you're looking at it from the perspective of the victim is not the victim. And it's tricky because the lawyer believes the women. He believes that they were never involved in this and that they were framed. However, there is a very interesting dynamic of trying to prove the girl's story correct while also believing the other side. I don't know. It just felt like a really interesting balance and a really interesting tug of war, and feelings wise, and like the victims need to be appreciated and told, like, you know, that they're valued. But then I can't even talk about without like spoiling too much. So it was interesting, and I thought it created some interesting turmoil inside me in a good way that made me think. Then I also read The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. I'm giving this one 4 stars. I had some problems with certain characters, but overall, I thought this was an Agatha Christie style mystery, which I really appreciated. I thought that the huge cast of Jane Austen characters were interesting together. And I also thought that the characters who I did not like the interpretation of, that, you know, it's up to Claudia Gray to have her interpretation. So she chose to interpret certain characters certain ways, and I can't change that. I will say I really enjoyed everything else. I enjoyed seeing Juliet Tilney as a detective with Jonathan Darcy, who's the younger son of Darcy and Elizabeth, when everyone's at a house party and Mr. Wickham shows up and gets murdered. So it's really interesting, the whole idea of these two, and I really liked also how they're like going behind social norms and trying to like not be seen meeting, because that would be a massive social faux pas. So I thought that was cool. But I really did like the mystery overall, even if certain characters were not to my liking. I pushed through, and then I was okay at the end, although, like I said, interpretations are different depending on the person. So not a bad book in my standard, if you can push through that character interpretation. All right, we're on to more Bible books that I read. So this was the day I just like put on my audiobook of the Bible and I just flew through a bunch. So I read Micah, Jonah, Habakkuk, Haggai, Nahum, Zephaniah, and Zechariah, and Malachi. So a lot. That was, I think, 13 Bible books that I read, and I just thought it was so interesting to read all of the prophets basically in one go, all the minor prophets at least. So I am officially now in the New Testament, which is super exciting. I have been reading the Bible from the beginning to where I am now for 8 months, and I think this is massive progress considering I read 75% of the Bible in 8 months. So I'm really proud of myself. Anyways, I also have purchased and read the book Golden Girls, which is called Goodnight Girls by Samantha Brooke. This one was just so fun. It's like a board book about the Golden Girls. It's about how Ma wants to get the girls to go to bed, but they have to stay up and get all dressed up, or they're eating cheesecake, or they really want a story, and so Rose starts telling a story about St. Olaf, but then Ma's like, no, let me tell you the story. Picture this. I just loved it. So good. So 5 stars. I just loved it. So nostalgic of the actual show itself while being in a kid's board book. So great. And the plot twist at the end, you just have to find a copy for yourself and read it. So yeah, fantastic. Really enjoyed that one. I also read, I actually have here, I decided to not do too much moving around because, like I said in my other video, I'm not feeling the greatest. And so I figured I'd film now, and I will. So I finished Norse Mythology. This one is a collection by multiple authors. So I will tell you the author's name since none of them are put on here. We have here Mary Lynchfield, Sarah Bradish, Edward Ernest Kellett, and William Morris. So I think those are most of the authors in here. And it was really interesting to learn about different characters in Norse mythology, have their interpretation told, but also I noticed that there is disability rep in Norse mythology. So obviously Odin has one eye, which I think is really cool that he traded his eye for wisdom, but he still has one eye. So there is a disability rep there, but also there is a scene where Thor, in one of the tales, has a battle, goes into battle, and or was it a duel? I think it was a duel. Anyways, he gets hit in the head with a rock, and whenever, basically through a long process of elimination, he can never get it out. And whenever someone drops the pots or the rocks or whatever it was, it gives Thor a headache, or it gives him pain. So that's why people in this time are very careful about how they dropped or put down things. So I think it's really interesting that Thor has headaches and head pain when people drop stuff. But then also there was one of the sagas about a man who could not walk. He was a prince who could walk, and then his legs were cut. I don't know if they were cut off or just cut where he couldn't walk anymore, but he could no longer walk, so he was lame is what they called him. So it's a little bit later. I hope it hasn't changed too much, but my phone had too much storage. So we're gonna rush through this as best we can. So for what I was talking about was Norse mythology. Really enjoyed the disability rep in here, but also really enjoyed learning about the mythology. I would give the first section a 5-star without a doubt. And then the second section of all of the sagas, 4 stars. So this is definitely a 4.5 if I were to be averaging it out, but I'm gonna call it a 4-star book. Highly recommend this mythology collection. Thought it was really well written and really enjoyable to read. Then I also have read this one, which is Who is William Shakespeare by Celeste, Davidson, Mannis. This has a bunch of pictures in it of Shakespeare's time. It talks about what we can assume of him, because we don't know too much from that time era, but this is a great series about history, about events, about people, and I really enjoy reading these. So I'm going to be reading some of these for Victober as well. So it's nonfiction about Charles Dickens or someone else, we'll see, but definitely Charles Dickens one I have my eye on. Then after those ones, I read, so it happens to be right here too, Precious Cargo by Craig Davidson. I'm giving this one a 4-star. This one follows his year of driving a school bus for children with disabilities. Now, I really enjoyed his story about learning how to work with children with disabilities and how to help them in a way that's not enabling them, or not enable necessarily, maybe catering to them or treating them like babies or impossible. I can't think of the word right now, but he learns how to interact with people with disabilities and realize they're normal people. So I thought that was really interesting. I did not enjoy as much his chapters about a fictional story that he never published. Didn't enjoy that so much, but I really enjoyed learning about his relationship with I believe it was 6 kids on his bus, maybe 7, who he learned to work with, and they taught him so much about life, but he also got to be a big influence in their lives over the course of a year. So thoroughly enjoyable. Then I also read One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. I'm giving this one a 3-star. It was just not my kind of YA mystery book. So in One of Us is Lying, it's about 4 students who are in the room when another student dies of an allergic reaction, and they are automatically assumed as the suspects. I figured out, not the whole thing, but I figured out decently. But also I really struggled with the element that I'm just not someone who likes to read a lot of romance in like YA books. It's just so cringy to me. So I'm just like, no thanks. So yeah, it was just a lot about the relationships and like the drama that comes from relationships. And I wasn't a massive fan of that. However, I thought it was a good mystery, but it's just not the series for me, I can tell. So it's going to be a 3-star, and I understand why people enjoy it. So there's that. Editing Naomi here to let you know that I forgot to put in The Moving Finger on my review. So The Moving Finger is about a brother and sister duo who moved to a small little country town, which they call a village, but the people call it a town. And they're just going there to get away, so the brother has the space and time to heal his body, as I think he was in a car accident or something. His legs need a lot of help, so he is struggling and he uses a cane. I thought his representation, by the way, was really good. Anyways, but this town is swarmed with blackmail letters or letters that are not exactly something you'd be proud of. So letters that often are talking about how certain people are doing certain things, how it's shameful, and they're not all true. Like most of them aren't true at all, but they are being represented. So that is the setup for this mystery, and the brother and sister duo are trying to figure out, because they're newcomers, especially when the letters causes one person to commit suicide. And that's kind of where this whole mystery is. I thought it was really interesting, but I really was disappointed. The reason I'm disappointed is because this is a Miss Marple book, and Miss Marple shows up at like the last 20% or something. It's very disappointing to me. I thought this would be a great independent novel of Christie's, and it was just like, I honestly haven't looked into the fact if they had the publisher made her make it a Marple. But it was like, this is a good independent, but I kept waiting for Marple to show up, and she never did until the last 20%. So I'm disappointed. So I gave it a 3-star just because I was like waiting for Marple and her wit and her solving and all of her skills, and it never came to fruition. But I did enjoy the mystery overall. So if you go in not expecting any Marple time, that's probably the best way to do it. But it was also, it was interesting. So it was following a lot of these letters and these different things, and basically social dynamics in a small town or a little village. So yeah, I would recommend it, but just don't go into it reading and expecting Marple to show up on the page. The last one I read was Victorian Murdresses by Debbie Blake. Yeah, Debbie Blake. I'm giving this one a 4-star. It's a collection about these women who lived in the Victorian era. A couple of them were from the States, so they're not necessarily British or Victorian like that, but they all lived in that time era, and they all committed murders. Now, some of them were massive serial killers, but some of them were also like a couple people, which is not to discredit those people's lives, but it's just interesting the scale of who was chosen for this book and their methods, and what they did to get into this book. And I think it's interesting to read about from a cultural standpoint and how that impacts the women and what the women went through. So I thought it was an interesting one. It's an arc that's coming out end of October, so I recommend you pick it up. So great nonfiction and very gory at some point. So if you're looking for a book that actually has like the nitty-gritty details in a lot of ways, this is the one for you. So 4 stars for Victorian Murdresses. So those are all the books that I read. I'm going to sign off before my phone dies of storage again before I fix it. But I hope that you have enjoyed these reviews. Please let me know down below if you read any of these or if they're now on your radar. Also, if you would like to, please let me know what kind of books I should read going forward that would be of interest to you, because I'm honestly in a mood where I could read just about anything, and I'd like to know so I can maybe help you guys out a bit with depending on what kind of books you're looking for. Anyways, I will chat with you soon. Hopefully I can get back my mojo. That'd be nice. Like I said, other video. But anyways, I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.